In an era where photo modes are an expected part of every major release, having a major release be nothing but a photo mode seems like a bold decision. But new Pokemon Snap is the follow-up to a far older game, more than 2 decades older in fact, and one of the most beloved and successful Pokemon spin-off releases ever. Pokemon Snap on the Nintendo 64 was beloved by Pokemon fans around the world for the deeper look into the Pokemon world that it provided, and for giving us the rare chance to see our favorite pocket monsters in 3 dimensions, interacting with the world around them in ways that simply wouldn't be possible on the Game Boy systems that played host to the mainline entries. Its appeal came from that, in fact. While it was a fairly well-designed on-rails shooter with a lovely Pacific twist, on the whole, the game's appeal came down singularly to its window into the world of Pokemon that we otherwise had such little insight into. Before we go ahead, a quick request. We upload new videos every single day, and your subscription matters a lot. So please consider subscribing and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's begin. So in light of the fact that modern Pokemon games have gotten substantially better at showing the world of Pokemon and how the creatures that inhabit that world interact with it, as well as the fact that, as mentioned, photo modes are a dime a dozen these days, would a new Pokemon Snap even make sense? Sure, the original was loved, but it was loved in context of the time of its release. Would there be any market for a full-priced on-rail shooter with the primary conceit being photography on the market? New Pokemon Snap makes a convincing case for its existence, in spite of the many factors mounted against it, and it also makes the argument that it, at least, can stand up on its own merits of its own core design, without necessarily needing the charm of the Pokemon license for its success. Which isn't to say that it doesn't have the charm, to be clear. In fact, it has oodles of it. It has so much of it that, once again, it far outstrips any other game on the market in giving us a window into the world of Pokemon, in spite of the modern Pokemon games being no slouches by themselves on that front. But being able to observe these Pokemon in their natural habitats and see how they interact with one another and with their environments, seeing how these creatures, that otherwise can often be reduced to nothing but stats in your PC box or 2 line entries in your Pokedex, are brought to life as fully realized and full-fledged creatures that feel believable and authentic is once enough to buoy this game far beyond the reach of its own, already fairly great core design. So, the setup. That's the same as it was before. You're a Pokemon professor's assistant, helping research Pokemon by photographing them in their natural habitat in the wild. That's the simple conceit. There is a story here regarding a mysterious phenomenon that the professor is experiencing that causes the Pokemon on the Lental region the game takes place on to glow, along with a surprising amount of characters and chatter. But the setup is, go out into the wild, take pictures of Pokemon. It's simple and flexible, and provides all the contextualization needed for what the game asks you to do. You'll be running on short on-rails courses, photographing the various Pokemon that show up there. The range of photographs you can capture is surprisingly varied. It depends not just on the photo basics such as positioning, zooming, number of subjects, framing, and such, but also on several game-specific considerations. So, there are different Pokemon that show up on different courses. They have a variety of different behavior patterns they can exhibit. They have different ways of interacting with the environment, and with the other Pokemon that they share their habitats with. Their behavior can differ based on the time of day, and whether or not they notice your presence can make a complete difference as to what they're doing. Additionally, you can catch their attention and get them to act in a certain way as well, whether it be by throwing food for them to nibble at or by playing a jingle for them to dance to. And finally, the more you get familiar with a course, represented by you leveling up your mastery in the game, the more number of Pokemon and their behaviors and interactions you are likely to see on them. These, combined with the game's premise, can lead to an endlessly entertaining line of objectives, prescribed and self-determined alike. For instance, you could be asked for something simple, such as taking a picture of a Pidgeot eating, or a dangling Metapod. Or you could be asked to take a picture of 2 Pokemon interacting, which in turn can only happen on a specific course where you know both will appear, at a time you know both are active, in an area that you know both are together, which can be a much harder picture to construct. The challenge comes from the familiarity with the courses that you build up over time, as well as your growing familiarity with its inhabitants. The game's great victory here is that even if you're not familiar with any of the newer Pokemon, or really any Pokemon at all, it still makes them stand out such that you can get to know them intimately just by repeatedly observing their behavior. Just by playing the game, it can tell you that Hoot Hoot are nocturnal, that Pikachu are extremely curious, that Slacking sleep a lot, that Scorbunny is mischievous, that Magikarp flounders a lot, that Grookey can be skittish, and that Pidgeot likes to keep its distance. Slowly learning the courses and slowly learning the Pokemon, and in turn being better able to take great pictures, can you keep engaged with the game for a surprisingly long period of time. The game goes out of its way to gamify these diegetic concepts as well. As mentioned, your mastery over the course can be leveled up, incentivizing you to run the same courses multiple times, over and over, and in turn unlocking more Pokemon species and interactions. Your photos are rated by Professor Mirror in a variety of categories, encouraging you to go back and take more to get higher points. Not to mention an entirely separate rating system where your photos are graded based on the rarity of Pokemon behavior they've captured, inducing you to go back and try to photograph Pokemon in all 4 possible behavior rarity interactions. And since this is a photo-based game in 2021, you can upload those photos online to get likes, medals in this game, from other players from around the world, which of course means you're likelier to keep going back to get the best possible photo for that online cred. And finally, there's also a global leaderboard that ranks you on the cumulative total of points that you have received from Professor Mirror, meaning that, very simply, the more that you play, the higher on it you'll be. None of this, of course, would work if the game simply wasn't good at delivering on its premise. As mentioned previously, this is a game that can only work if the window into the world of Pokemon that it provides is meaningfully fleshed out. New Pokemon Snap does that with aplomb, aided in large part by its surprisingly great presentation. No one will ever mistake this for a PlayStation 5 game, nor is it even necessarily among the best-looking games on its own system. But a very strong art style and a lot of loving care put into the animations and models for the Pokemon means that it looks extremely charming and really pretty, as well as, almost by default, better than any other Pokemon game to date, though that's more of an indictment of how poor the games in the series have looked so far when they have had no reason to. There are blemishes to be sure. Thumbnails on the photos you take can look decidedly and shockingly low resolution. The lack of anti-aliasing can be physically painful at times, and there are, shockingly, frame rate drops on loading screens, but only on loading screens in my experience. But for what it's worth, these never once actually happen during the core loop of the game, which is when you're out in the wild photographing Pokemon. New Pokemon Snap is also the first Pokemon game ever to be voiced, which is something the series will hopefully retain going forward. While the quality of the voice work in the game isn't spectacular, it is solid, and more than anything else, it does the important job of ensuring that this game remains accessible to younger players who may not know how to read on at least a fundamental level. Not all lines are voiced, so a lot of the game is presumably still going to require the help of parents for them to get. The soundtrack is similarly nothing great, especially next to how fantastic the music in the mainline games has always been, but it is pleasant and charming and gets the job done. New Pokemon Snap is also surprisingly customizable. Unlike so many other Nintendo titles, it gives its players a lot of options, from the ability to tweak controls to restricting just how much online interactions the game pushes on you, to toggling the voice acting, and more. Given Nintendo games typically tend to be delivered as a whole, with very little in the way of meaningful options provided to players, hopefully this marks the start of a new trend for them. Even though, yes, I know that Pokemon is largely independent of Nintendo and not necessarily indicative of their broader development philosophy. And this is a Pokemon spin-off to boot, so presumably even more disconnected. How much value you get from new Pokemon Snap will come down to how much you take to its core conceit. It's incredibly fleshed out and full-featured, and feels like an appropriately next generation evolution and follow-up on the original. There's a surprising amount of content here, far beyond the original game, so you're not spending full-price money on something you can be done with in a few hours. And it's far more interactive than you'd expect as well. But it is still a rail shooter. It is still about taking photos repeatedly, and that's all there is to it. Everything else is a variation on that core idea. If the idea of an entire game based on taking pictures of Pokemon does not appeal to you, then New Pokemon Snap can't change your mind, as great as it is at what it does. But if you are down for what it offers, then you're in for an incredibly charming, heartwarming, and extremely breezy ride through the Lental region that will show you the world of Pokemon in a way that you have never seen before. And with that, we reached the end of the video. Have anything to say? Let us know in the comments below. Also, we upload new videos every single day on GamingBolt, so please consider subscribing, as it really helps us out. Thanks for watching.